You know, um, when you look at a world map, there's this comforting expectation of certainty, right?
Oh, absolutely. You trust the lines on the paper.
Exactly. You trust the math of the map. You just assume that the distance between point A and point B is a fixed, undeniable rule of physics.
Right.
But what happens when a military weapon just, well, simply ignores that math?
Yeah, that's when things get complicated.
Right. When a strike reaches across what should be a geographical impossibility, and suddenly those neat borders we rely on to, understand global security, they're completely blurred.
Completely.
So today, we're going to trace a straight line through this deep dive, from a geographical paradox involving an Iranian missile strike to the incredibly fragile geopolitical tightrope the UK is currently walking.
And then bringing it right back home.
Yeah, right down to the mechanics of how a conflict thousands of miles away is, like algorithmically pricing into your monthly mortgage and energy bills before the dust even settles.
It's all connected.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. And to help me do that, I'm joined by our resident expert. And just to be clear up front, our goal today is purely structural.
Right. No politics here.
Exactly.
Right.
We aren't taking any political sides, right, left, or center. We're just here to impartially synthesize the facts, the strategies, and the physical realities of what is happening on the ground exactly as the sources are reporting it.
And, the physical reality is exactly where this entire geopolitical chain reaction starts.
Right.
Because if we look at the raw data from March 20th, Iran fired 2 ballistic missiles targeting Diego Garcia, which is a joint U.S.-UK military base located deep in the Indian Ocean.
Deep in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah. Now, tactically, the attack itself failed. I mean, one missile suffered a mid-flight failure, and the other was intercepted by a U.S. defense shield.
Okay, so the base was safe.
Right. But the military failure isn't the real story here. The real story is the impossible math of the flight path.
Yeah, because the sheer distance is just staggering. I mean,
Right.
Diego Garcia is roughly 4,000 kilometers away from those launch sites in Iran.
Exactly.
But if you look at Iran's officially claimed military capabilities, like the systems they actually publicize to the world, their absolute maximum missile range is supposed to be 2,000 kilometers.
Right, half the distance.
Half.
Yeah.
The official roster cites the Sigil, the Gadror, and the Khorramshahr systems maxing out at that 2,000 mark, with older systems, like the Shahab 3, only reaching about 1,300 kilometers.
Which is way short of Diego Garcia.
So I have to stop right there and look at the mechanics of this.
Mm.
Because if a car company claims their vehicle gets 30 miles to the gallon, you might expect 35 on a really good day.
Sure, maybe a slight tailwind.
Right.
Yeah.
But you do not expect it to suddenly get 60 unless someone fundamentally altered the vehicle. You don't just wake up and your engine is twice as efficient.
No, you don't.
So how does a military manage to literally double its public strike range without global intelligence sounding the alarm months in advance?
Well, it comes down to a ruthless game of physics and payload trade-offs. Analysts are actually calling this Iran's phantom reach.
Phantom reach.
Yeah. When a nation wants to maintain the element of surprise, they don't necessarily need to invent brand new cutting-edge propulsion systems from scratch.
Right.
Instead, they take an existing airframe and they alter the math by drastically shrinking the warhead.
Meaning it carries less explosives.
Exactly. The missile carries significantly less explosive weight, which frees up physical space and weight capacity. And then they pack that newly available space with extra solid propellant, or they covertly bolt on an additional booster stage.
Wow. So they are essentially sacrificing raw destructive power for pure fuel capacity.
Precisely. You take a known medium-range system, strip it down, gas it up, and suddenly, well, it becomes an unpredictable long-range wildcard.
It's terrifying.
And it isn't just theory. Beyond the official list, there is this shadow roster of speculative systems. You have the SOMAR, which is presumed to reach between 2,000 and 3,000 kilometers.
Okay.
An upgraded, multi-stage Sigil that hits around 2,500. And then you get into the heavier speculation, like the Shahab 5, which intelligence estimates could exceed 5,000 kilometers.
Jeez.
And there are persistent rumors of a Shahab 6, which would be an intercontinental ballistic missile designed for a 10,000-kilometer reach.
10,000 kilometers. I mean, that doesn't just threaten a regional base. That completely rewrites the global security map.
It absolutely does.
And it adds this massive layer of urgency to the U.S. and Israeli response. because their stated goal, as highlighted in the recent broadcast we reviewed, isn't necessarily regime change anymore.
Right, it's shifted.
Yeah, it's the total physical depletion of Iran's missile and nuclear manufacturing capabilities.
And the nuclear component is really the accelerator here, because Iran reportedly possesses several hundred kilograms of uranium enriched to about 50%.
Which is a terrifying number when you understand the enrichment process. I mean, getting uranium to 50% is the hardest, most time-consuming part of the physics.
Exactly. The initial climb is the toughest.
Right, jumping from 50% up to 90%, which is weapons-grade material that takes a fraction of the time. They're essentially sitting right on the doorstep of a nuclear threshold.
And that proximity totally dictates the military strategy. You can't permanently neutralize highly enriched nuclear material, which, often buried deep in subterranean bunkers, with just a simple airstrike.
Where the bunkers are too deep?
Yeah. So total depletion of that capability would likely require U.S. ground operations, like highly specialized search, seizure, and destruction missions deep inside Iranian territory.
Right.
And when you combine that reality with this geographical surprise of a missile striking 4,000 kilometers away, you start to understand the immense multi-layered pressure of the situation.
It also explains why the U.S. military posture looks so, well, contradictory from the outside right now.
It really does.
Because you have President Trump posting on Truth Social that the U.S. is getting very close to its objectives, floating the idea of winding down military efforts because they're already obliterating the opposition.
Yeah.
But at the exact same moment he's talking about winding down, the Pentagon has 5,000 troops on 6 ships actively sailing from California toward the region. You don't deploy 5,000 personnel across the Pacific if you are actually packing up to go home.
No, you definitely don't. And former senior U.S. naval officer Brian Clark provided some crucial insight on this exact paradox in the materials.
Oh, yeah. What did he say?
Well, deploying those 5,000 troops from California isn't necessarily a contradiction. It is about extending your leverage.
All leverage, okay.
Yeah. In modern conflict, the physical presence of troops is a psychological weapon. It signals to Tehran that a full-scale ground invasion remains a very real operational option.
I see.
You sail the ships to force the adversary toward capitulation, which allows you to achieve the objective without ever having to actually order those troops off the boats.
So it's basically a geopolitical poker game,
Yeah.
but the chips are ballistic missiles and aircraft carriers. And this is exactly where the chain reaction leaves the ocean and slams directly into British domestic politics. Because Diego Garcia, the target of that 4,000-kilometer Phantom Reach, is not exclusively American territory.
No, it's not.
It is a joint U.S.-UK base located in the Chagos Islands. So the moment that missile entered that airspace, it instantly triggered this complex web of host nation legalities for the United Kingdom.
Which forces the UK government into one of the most precarious diplomatic tightropes imaginable.
Yeah.
Because under international law, there's a razor-thin legal distinction between providing host nation support and being an active combatant in a war.
Right.
And the UK is desperately trying to maintain the former while avoiding the latter. They are defining their involvement strictly as defensive action.
And the official parameters they've set are very specific. The UK states its role is limited to intercepting incoming attacks to protect infrastructure, safeguarding the roughly 300,000 British nationals currently living and working in the Gulf region.
That's a huge number of people.
It is. And allowing the U.S. to use British bases for what they term collective self-defense. In fact, the government has been repeating a very specific mantra in the press.
Yes, the quote.
Yeah, the quote is, "I made it really clear that we wouldn't join the offensive strikes. We are not joining the war."
But what's fascinating here is that while that is their legal semantic shield, the operational reality in the airspace tells a much more aggressive story.
Definitely.
Because the UK has authorized the United States to launch B-1 bombers, which are aircraft designed to carry the absolute largest payloads the U.S. military can deploy in the region directly from British soil.
Right.
These bombers are taking off from RAA Fairford in rural Gloucestershire, flying thousands of miles and actively bombing the Iranian coastline to clear out threats to international shipping.
So I have to challenge the semantics of that defensive claim with a real-world scenario.
Go for it.
If you are sitting in a pub and you let the biggest, most heavily armed guy in the bar throw devastating punches right from your table,
Right.
and you hold his coat and buy his drinks while he does it, can you realistically stand up and tell the rest of the room you aren't involved in a bar fight?
From the perspective of the adversary, absolutely not.
No.
And that is the exact tension tearing through Parliament right now. because by providing the literal runway for offensive, heavy payload bombers, the UK's claim of purely collective self-defense is facing severe structural backlash.
It's a massive political fracture. And again, mapping this impartially based on the reports, the opposition is coming from every side.
Across the board.
Yeah. The conservative leader has publicly branded this base agreement the mother of all U-turns. The Liberal Democrats and the Green Party are raising intense alarms about sleepwalking into a regional escalation.
Yeah, the escalation fear is real.
And you have Labour MPs demanding a formal parliamentary vote to legally define the exact boundaries of this UK-US base sharing agreement. They want it firmly on the record.
And while the domestic political theater is intense, the international response carries immediate physical consequences.
Right.
Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, did not mince words. He publicly warned that by allowing its territory to be used as a launch pad for American bombers, the UK has inherently become a legitimate target.
Wow.
He stated that Iran will exercise its right to self-defense, effectively putting a target on the backs of those 300,000 British nationals living in the Gulf.
Which is just a chilling reality for those expatriates.
Yeah.
It perfectly illustrates how nearly impossible it is for a sovereign nation to cleanly untangle itself from the kinetic actions of its primary military ally.
It really is.
You share a base, you share the consequences. But we need to look at exactly why those B-1 bombers from Gloucestershire are targeting that specific stretch of the Iranian coastline.
Yes.
Because they aren't just bombing military installations in a vacuum. They are clearing the coast to protect one specific vital geographic bottleneck, the Strait of Hormuz.
And the Strait of Hormuz is basically the economic jugular vein of the globalized world. To understand the gravity here, you really have to look at the volume.
What are the numbers?
Before this current escalation, 20% of the entire planet's oil supply passed through that single, incredibly narrow shipping lane.
20%. That is massive.
It's huge. So when physical conflict disrupts that traffic, whether through actual strikes on tankers or just the prohibitive cost of maritime insurance skyrocketing, it creates an immediate, severe supply shock.
And this is where the distant geopolitical chessboard violently collides with your everyday life. I mean, we are talking to an audience that deeply understands how global markets work.
Right.
The insight here isn't just that international tension causes inflation. We all know that. It's the terrifying algorithmic speed of the reaction. We live in a world where a physical kinetic action in the Indian Ocean is aggressively priced into London financial markets within 72 hours.
And the timeline of the domestic fallout is playing out in real time. We are seeing political correspondent Jack Fenwick highlighting that the UK government has called an emergency COBRA meeting for next week.
And for context, for those who don't know, COBRA is the Crisis Response Committee convened only for severe national emergencies.
Exactly.
And the attendee list includes the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, the Energy Secretary, and most tellingly, the Governor of the Bank of England.
Yeah, that last one is key.
You do not invite the Governor of the Bank of England to a military disaster meeting unless the foundational economy is flashing red. I look at this dynamic like a human body going into medical shock.
Okay, how so?
When the human body experiences massive trauma, it instantly pulls blood away from the extremities to protect the vital organs in the core. That is exactly what the banking system is doing right now.
Right.
The global energy market suffers a shock, and within days, banks start pulling mortgage deals off the table, restricting lending to everyday people, just to protect their core liquidity.
That is an incredibly accurate way to model the financial mechanics at play here. The Governor of the Bank of England is sitting at that COBRA table because of preemptive, unavoidable mathematics. It's called cost-push inflation. If the Strait of Hormuz is contested, oil and gas prices spike. If energy prices spike, the cost to manufacture and transport literally every single good in the economy spikes.
Right. Inflation is basically guaranteed to surge.
Exactly. And the central bank's primary blunt force weapon to combat that inflation is to preemptively hike interest rates to cool down the broader economy.
And the retail banks know this rate hike is coming, so they pull the mortgage applications before the central bank even makes the official announcement. The speed is just breathtaking.
It really is.
And the government is staring down a ticking clock on the domestic release policies that are currently holding the line. Because right now, average household energy bills have been cut.
Right.
There are 17 pounds of new targeted support metrics in place, specifically for rural households relying on heating oil. And that's alongside strict governmental warnings against price gouging on fuel deliveries. But those safety nets have hard expiration dates.
Yeah, they are entirely temporary. The current protective cap on household energy bills is legally set to expire at the end of June.
End of June. That's coming up fast.
And the freeze on fuel duty for drivers, which has artificially kept transportation costs manageable, that only lasts until September. And the markets aren't waiting for the fall.
No, they are.
The RAC, the UK's premier motoring organization, is looking at the crude oil futures right now and predicting severe petrol and diesel price hikes at the pumps within a matter of days.
So the Chancellor and the Bank of England are looking at an impossible math problem. And hanging over that entire COBRA meeting is the ghost of the recent past, because the reporting notes that ministers are absolutely terrified of a repeat of the economic devastation caused by the Russia-Ukraine energy spike.
Oh, without a doubt. During the onset of the war in Ukraine, the disruption to European gas supplies forced the UK government to step in with an eye-watering, historically massive financial bailout.
Just to keep people afloat.
Just to keep citizens from freezing in their homes and businesses from collapsing under energy debts. It fundamentally altered the national deficit.
Yeah.
From a purely fiscal standpoint, no government possesses the capital to foot a bailout of that magnitude twice in the same decade without risking severe sovereign debt crises.
But they might not have a choice if the Strait of Hormuz remains a contested combat zone.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the ultimate inescapable demonstration of how modern military strategy and domestic cost of living policies are permanently, inextricably intertwined.
They really are.
You truly cannot separate the payload of a B-1 bomber taking off from RAF Fairford from the price of heating a two-bedroom flat in Manchester this winter.
It operates as a continuous geopolitical feedback loop. The military deployments are authorized to stabilize the global shipping lanes, which, are necessary to stabilize the domestic economy.
Right.
But those very same kinetic military actions provoke asymmetric responses from the adversary, which in turn further destabilizes the shipping lanes. The governments maneuver the pieces, but the everyday citizen is the one absorbing the friction of that loop directly through their wallet.
Man, it really puts into perspective the gravity and the interconnected fragility of the decisions being made this very second.
It certainly does.
I mean, we started this deep dive looking at a physical mystery.
Yeah.
A missile that traveled 4,000 kilometers when the official math said it should only fly 2,000.
Yep.
We followed the physics of that phantom reach to the Chagos Islands, which violently dragged the UK's defensive legal semantics into the international spotlight.
He did.
And we traced the subsequent launch of those heavy bombers straight down to the algorithmic speed of interest rate hikes and the expiration dates on your household energy caps.
And as we step back to look at the whole board, it brings to mind a really poignant observation made by the BBC correspondent covering this. They said, ending conflicts is often harder than starting them.
That is so true.
But if we look toward the horizon, it raises a fascinating new variable about how we actually manage that economic fallout moving forward.
Oh, I love where this is going. What's the variable?
Well, we are entering an era where global supply chains are increasingly managed by artificial intelligence and predictive algorithms.
Okay.
So if modern conflicts are fought just as fiercely on commodity markets as they are on battlefields, will the rise of AI logistics eventually insulate our wallets by instantly rerouting global trade the second a missile is fired?
Wow.
Or will algorithmic trading systems simply process the panic faster, pricing in the geopolitical fear before human policymakers even have time to convene a COBRA meeting?
That is a brilliant and, frankly, slightly unsettling question to ponder. Are the machines going to act as our shock absorbers, or are they just going to accelerate the impact?
It's something we're all going to have to watch.
Because as we've seen today, the map doesn't just show us where the borders are anymore. It shows us the hidden high-speed wires connecting a spark on one side of the world directly to the safety nets on the other. You really can't just trust the neat lines and the red dots.
No, you can't.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the headlines, keep looking for the invisible mechanics behind the scenes, and we will catch you next time.